So how do we demonstrate intelligence? Well, lucky for us, the etymology and definition tell us exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for discriminating circumstances that establish a situation that must be understood, and actions that reflect an intentional avoidance of a poor choice. In science, the term falsifiability refers to the ability of an explanation to be countered with either real or hypothetical evidence. As a concept, it is useful to science because an explanation is not scientific if it cannot be tested, and an idea cannot be tested if it is unfalsifiable because it cannot fail to explain any amount of contradictory evidence. So given that we cannot measure intelligence, we can only test for understanding and work backwards to determine the potential to understand. As with the concept of falsifiability, in order for a test to exist, failure must be a possible outcome, and thus the limits involved in a situation that establish the possibility of failure are necessary components for demonstrating understanding and the potential for it, because without the possibility of fault or failure, you can test for nothing. Success, on the other hand, is not necessary to demonstrate understanding. If a person does nothing, it might be because they're completely incompetent, or it might be because they're so competent that they realize the futility of the task. So let me state here that design is all a matter of goals and obstacles, and that it is through the obstacle-goal relationship that we evaluate intelligence. The reason I quoted Zhuangzi is that he understood that the obstacle-goal relationship governs all that we think and do, as well as what we know about ourselves. And according to the format of the intelligent design argument, creation falls under the purview of this construct. Even the fact that it is called intelligent design means that we must assume that there is an obstacle-goal relationship at work. Let me explain what I mean. In order to achieve any given goal, a being must have the power to do so. We don't like to dwell on all of the things that we can't do. We don't like to talk about all of the things that we can't have. And lacking omnipotence, we must be able to describe how a being can achieve a goal despite its limitations. Intelligence exists as a word to account for this phenomenon. We invented this word as a means of describing the ability to navigate our way past environmental obstacles to get things done. But humans are not the only beings that have intelligence, so when we think of intelligence tests for other animals, let's say a mouse, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Mazes. But why? Well, as I just explained, the etymology of intelligence indicates that the word is meant to describe situations wherein decisions must be made. Mazes establish the situational constructs under which a mouse must make a decision, and thus we rate the mouse's understanding of the situation by the efficiency with which it gets to the end of the maze, with an acknowledgement of the expected errors that come with the initial ignorance of the maze's layout. Of course, this is where memory becomes a factor in intelligence. In order to know how much ability a person has to understand something, we must know for how long they will be able to learn from their mistakes, and thus the time frame in which you study their behavior becomes important. But for the purposes of this explanation, that is all irrelevant. No matter how many other functions might be necessary for demonstrating understanding, no matter how many other attributes and defining characteristics might be involved, no conscious action makes sense with respect to determining its driving intelligence if you do not know what that being aims to do and why they think their course of action is the most prudent one to pursue. So going back to the maze principle, one can easily ascertain the intelligence of a mouse based on the efficiency with which it reaches the end over successive trials. But as I said earlier, this is all dependent on whether or not the observer has accurately determined the goal involved. If you set up an obstacle course for your dog at home and he stops halfway through to lick his balls, that doesn't necessarily mean that your dog is retarded. It could very well be that licking his balls was simply higher on his agenda than hanging out with you. The crux of the matter is that we do not base intelligence on complexity. This is an association fallacy. We base intelligence on simplicity with respect to the obstacles that force our designs to be complex. We design things because we are limited. We demonstrate intelligence because we are limited. If there were no obstacles to any given goal, then the simplest route would remain the smartest thing to use, regardless of how much or how little intelligence it actually took to get there.
No, I get into those arguments all the time. All the time. Friends of mine will be like, well, how come anytime a black athlete does something, they say it's an athletic move? Anytime a white athlete does it, they say it's an intelligent move. And it's like, well, fair enough, man. It just depends on what you're doing. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, if you read a defense, white or black, that's an intelligent move, right? But if you take off from the foul line, jump over 9 other dudes, and throw the shit down, those other 9 guys aren't standing there like, fuck, why didn't I think of that shit? Here I am dribbling around, guys. I think that's some superhero shit. Shit like a cape flapping in the wind with a big S on your chest.
So long as the power to achieve a goal exists, intelligence is almost entirely irrelevant, save for the acknowledgement that the goal exists in the first place by striving to achieve it. If you understand this and you agree with me, then in all honesty, you can skip to the end where I explain the necessary paradox and why the intelligent design argument has to exist. I will also explain why atheists should abandon the who designed the designer argument altogether and what question we should be asking instead. If you do not agree with me, or if you just want a better understanding of the civilization around you, then I strongly urge you to continue watching. So I just explained how mazes work, but the obstacle-goal relationship doesn't just work on the physical level, it also works in the abstract. In the movie Donnie Darko, fraudster Jim Cunningham markets a self-help seminar that uses emotional appeals to convince its participants that they have been freed from the tyranny of their own insecurities. Let's watch as an avid follower of his work propagates his reductionist approach to the human condition and observe the response from the protagonist of the story.
Ling Ling finds a wallet on the ground filled with money. She takes the wallet to the address on the driver's license but keeps the money inside the wallet. I'm sorry, Miss Farmer, I don't get this.
Just place an X on the lifeline in the appropriate place.
No, I mean, I know what to do. I don't get this. You can't just lump things into 2 categories. Things aren't that simple.
The lifeline is divided that way.
Well, life isn't that simple. I mean, who cares if Ling Ling returns the wallet and keeps the money? It has nothing to do with either fear or love.
Fear and love are the deepest of human emotions.
Okay, but you're not listening to me. There are other things that need to be taken into account here, like the whole spectrum of human emotion. You can't just lump everything into these 2 categories and then just deny everything else.
If you don't complete the assignment, you'll get a 0 for the day.
When engaging in a discussion aimed at productive conclusions, the goal is not to simply form an explanation. What a proponent of an idea must do in order to establish credibility is form an explanation that is consistent with the available facts. Reality, as it usually does, becomes the limiting factor in the amount of simplicity that an intelligently constructed thing can have. We live in a world full of facts, but facts cannot interpret themselves. Participants in a given debate therefore demonstrate their intellect not only by laying out clear and cogent positions, but also by being able to justifiably discern pertinent facts from non-pertinent facts. The debate ensues when there is a contest over whose facts are more worthy of consideration and in what way they fit into the puzzle. That different people subjectively ascribe varying amounts of significance to different facts to arrive at opposing conclusions is irrelevant to my argument here. What is important is to recognize that each of their fact sets are objectively present and paramount according to each advocate's respective views, and thus the obstacle-goal relationship is maintained. Take for instance the vaccination debate between alternative medicine and science-based medicine. In DeRoy Light's video series, Why People Ignore Vaccine Denialists, he aptly mentions that one of the favored tactics of the denialist is to point out that smallpox deaths increased after government-mandated vaccination policies were put into place. This is a fact, and as such, it does provide a significant hurdle for any uneducated science advocate who would otherwise champion the administration of vaccines. So how does DeRoy Light address this issue? Well, he provides additional information from verifiable sources which independently explain the sudden spike in smallpox deaths as being the result of the anti-vaccination movement itself, which spread fear and instructed people on how to circumnavigate the law. And then he goes one step further to explain what the anti-vaccinators cannot: the sudden drop in deaths that immediately followed the closing of those very same legislative loopholes. Clearly, associating pertinent data points along specific lines of reasoning makes the argument more clearly defined, and prevents alternate explanations from being considered with equal merit, due to the unnecessary complexity that such an argument would have to adopt in order to remain tenable. The simplest remaining explanation becomes the best and most convincing one so long as it accounts for all registered and future data without resorting to non sequiturs or irrelevant information.